Every week, Question Time travels to a different part of the United Kingdom. Tonight, we've come to Birmingham, a city with one of the UK's youngest and most diverse populations, the birthplace of Cadbury's chocolate, heavy metal and the chicken Balti. It also boasts more miles of canals than Venice, apparently. The City Council is emerging from a financial crisis that led to service cuts and council tax rising by about 18% over the past 2 years. As usual, our audience members arriving here this evening reflect the general political picture across the nation. And tonight they want to ask, are our politicians capable of having an honest conversation about integration and immigration? And is the government taxing pubs and restaurants out of business? Welcome to Question Time from Birmingham. From the government, the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, who once ran against Keir Starmer for the Labour leadership. She's described the recent turmoil in Labour ranks as unforgivable. For the Conservatives, Alicia Kearns is Shadow Home Office Minister. Before entering Parliament in 2019, she was a counter-terrorism consultant and has visited war zones across the world. She says she's not easily spooked. Jess Brown-Fuller is the Liberal Democrats Justice spokesperson and the MP for Chichester. Before politics, she was an events officer and a local councillor. Tom Kerridge is a chef and business owner who endorsed Labour at the last election, but warns that the hospitality industry is running out of steam, money and energy. And Esther Kraku is a broadcaster and columnist who describes herself as socially conservative and thinks that Britain has been cursed with stupid politicians. So let's see what she thinks tonight. Good evening. Welcome to our panel of politicians, and Esther and Tom. And of course, welcome to you all for coming here tonight in Birmingham. Great to see you, and welcome to you at home. Join the conversation on social media, or just sit back and watch the programme and hear what everyone's got to say. Whichever, take your pick. Right, let's start with our first question, which is from Jake Jones.
As immigration remains politically divisive, is Britain succeeding at integration, or are we failing to have an honest conversation about identity and social cohesion?
Jake, and it's worth mentioning that there were comments by Robert Jenrick, formerly of your parish, now Reform UK, who made some comments about Handsworth, saying, I didn't see another white face, and that's not the kind of country I want to live in. I want to live in a country where people are properly integrated. Are we failing to have an honest conversation, Esther?
Yes, we are. This week we saw a major British political party put out a campaign ad in Urdu with the Green Party for the Gorton and the Denton and Gorton by-election. And I think that encapsulates the extent to which integration and multiculturalism has failed in this country. I don't actually believe in multiculturalism. I believe in a multi-ethnic society. You can have successful multi-ethnic societies like you have in Singapore and other parts of the world, but you cannot have a multicultural society because someone's culture has to take precedence. And I think what it says about this by-election, that you have a major political party that's fanning the flames of sectarianism by putting out an ad in a language that 97% of people in this country do not speak, is just showing that they're happy to divide people on tribal and ethnic lines in order to push their political agenda. And you have to wonder, why should I pay taxes in a country and feel like I'm part of this community, and yet the people that I'm living with are happy to not even learn how to speak the basic language of the country, that's the language that's supposed to unify us as a country. And now you have political parties that are happy to say it's okay that you don't speak the language of the national country. You can live parallel lives like you are choosing to do, because our politicians haven't had a proper, sensible, adult conversation about integration in this country. And that is, we are supposed to just take that on the chin and say, actually, that's diversity being our strength. It's not a strength, it's a weakness. And this is not a right-wing talking point. In Denmark, for example, they've implemented anti-ghetto policy since 2018, which restricts funding for social housing where populations in certain areas are over 40% non-Western. And the idea behind that is to force physical integration of groups of people in the country, because that is what actually unifies a society. In Singapore, for example, you have actual ethnic quotas in each building, so people are forced to integrate. And the importance of that is that we do not live parallel lives alongside each other and call ourselves a country. That doesn't make us a country. We become an airport lounge where you have people from all different backgrounds, speaking different languages, going their own direction with no values bonding us, sharing a same geographic location. And I don't think that's the way that Britain wants to go. And I think it's horrifying that in a place like Manchester, that only a few months ago, 2 British Jews were murdered just for being Jews, this is happening, and I think that's unacceptable.
So, you mentioned Denmark and Singapore, and just coming back to Robert Jenrick's comments, he was talking about Handsworth. Now, Handsworth, over 90% of the population are black, Asian, or ethnic minority. But of course, surely it's more complex than Singapore and Denmark, is it not? Because many of those will be British, you know, British for many generations. So when it comes to trying to integrate something like that, I mean, it's not necessarily straightforward, is it?
It is quite straightforward. You have to have physical integration. You cannot be in a territory where people don't actually mix with each other, and you have people basically congregating according to ethnic and tribal lines. And I will say, I'm not going to defend Robert Jenrick's point because he's more than capable of defending himself. He's the one that said it. He can defend himself. But I would say that France is a cautionary tale. And I lived in France for a bit, and I worked in France. France has basically the same population as the UK, something around 70 million, but it has twice the landmass. And you're seeing a real problem with ghettoization in places like France because you have what effectively becomes chain migration. People, and this is human nature, people that are familiar with each other, they come to certain parts of the country and they kind of cluster in groups. They all speak similar languages, have similar culture, similar religion. And what that ends up happening is you have these mini clans within different parts of the country that do not integrate, that do not feel a sense of identity. If this country was at war, do you think that people that do not even bother to learn the language of the country will be fighting for me and you? How is that a country? It's completely obscene.
Okay, I mean, you mentioned the Greens and their leafleting. They're obviously not here to defend themselves. I'm sure they would say that they are not doing it for racist reasons, but I mean, it's up to them. But they're not here on this panel, so that's why I mention it. Lisa, what do you make of what Esther has to say?
Well, some of what she said, I suppose there is some common ground, but I profoundly disagree, actually. I grew up in Manchester in the 1980s at a time when we had politicians that were seeking to stoke division because they had no answers to the challenges that the country faced. And, you know, I was growing up in a household where I was being raised by my mum. My parents were divorced. We're being told that families like ours were the problem, with single parents, you know, single mums being demonised, with people like my dad who came to this country from India in the 1950s and made an outstanding contribution to this country, and we were being told that we were the problem. But actually, as I was growing up with my friends in Manchester in an ordinary state school where we came from all ethnic backgrounds and none at all, because we just didn't notice because it was so normal. We told a completely different story about the sort of city and the sort of country that we were. And if I'm honest, I think we're a better country than the politicians that we've got who are seeking to stoke this sort of division. I think about Birmingham. I mean, I look around Birmingham and I think, yes, we've got a housing problem. Why have we got a housing problem? Not because of immigrants, but because we had a Tory government that didn't build any houses. We've got a child poverty problem, not because of immigrants, but because we had a benefits system that deliberately withheld benefits from children and punished them for being in larger families, which we've changed. And, you know, I think particularly about the great strengths of this city, whether it's manufacturing, music, or now in film with the work going on at Digbeth Locks and Stephen Knight and Peaky Blinders, which is lighting up the world. And I think, why is Birmingham so successful at these things? Why has it always lit up the world through those disciplines? And it's because of the likes of Ozzy Osbourne and UB40, Benjamin Zephaniah, and I just think politicians like Robert Jenrick, I don't know where they get off, frankly, coming to one of the greatest cities in the world and telling people that we are the problem when this city's diversity has always been and will always remain one of its greatest strengths.
So I'm from Handsworth. I run a heritage organisation, and I take deep offence to what was said. There's no white faces or black faces or Asian faces, and I'm just saying that in general. when politicians ever come to our area, I'm proud to come from Handsworth. I'm proud of the work that we do in heritage sector where there's so many cuts. No, the politicians are not looking for women like me. They just come in, it was outside the library, and then for 5 minutes and they vanished. Had you gone further up the road or actually speak to people, I used to be a former youth worker and I've worked in the prison service. Had you come to the actual people without funding, doing implementing strong work in the heritage sector, I could have brought you more faces. I could have brought you the white faces that have lived here since the 40s, the 50s, and their families. I think Handsworth is getting a bad rep, but no government is speaking out for us, and the funding is really cutting the work that we're doing. So, and that is causing this racial tension and hatred towards each other.
Okay, man at the very back in the corner there with a T-shirt, yes.
Rather than, on the point about the Urdu advert, rather than demonising individuals for not being able to speak English, perhaps we should be doing something more, not only as a city, but as a country, to facilitate individuals. From my personal experience, my father's side of the family emigrated from India to the UK back in the 40s, 50s time. My grandmother, from a traditional Indian background, she was expected to stay at home. She didn't have the opportunities to learn English. It wasn't necessarily a lack of want, it was a lack of opportunity. And I, unfortunately, didn't grow up being able to speak Punjabi, and so therefore I've had this language barrier with her. And I think by working together as a society, rather than demonizing individuals because they can't speak English, we could probably achieve this apparent multiculturalism that can't exist, which is, in my opinion, quintessentially British and part of the British identity.
Okay, man right in the middle there with the glasses.
I think British politics has kind of lost its way with the constant polarising language between whose side is on what. And I really think that we need to get back British values in terms of tolerance and respect again, because we're losing our way.
Okay, and does anyone agree with what Esther had to say, just out of interest? Yes, there's a man there in the pink shirt.
Yes, I do agree that the main principle is about integration. I give an example of my daughter was born in this country. He went to study medicine in Romania. And when he came back, he had to do an English test before he could practice here. Then if that is an expectation from somebody who was born in England, speaks English, studied in English for the first 17 years of her life, had to come back to pass an English test before practicing, how come an immigrant should not have that same expectation to speak English?
Can I answer that?
Yes.
Notice, first of all, we're all having this conversation in English because I think we can all establish that it's important for us to understand each other. And the argument that I'm making is not to demonize people who don't speak English. I do think it's a big problem that people that have been here for generations that don't speak English. I think that's actually, at that point, it's a choice, if you've been in this country for many years. But the solution to that, other than having an adult conversation about what unites us as a country, what are we fighting for, what do we have in common with our neighbors, being able to communicate with them, for one, is important. It's also about asking, well, how do we actually give people the opportunity to learn English? If they're living in communities where all the people that they communicate with speak one language that is not English, that's not a way to help them. And this is why I was citing the Denmark example. This is a government that has deliberately put resources behind actually getting people to integrate. They're not just saying, oh, it's the immigrants' fault. It's saying, actually, let's engineer a situation where the indigenous population can also mix with the immigrant population to actually create some sort of unity and harmony. That's not going to happen when you have chain migration in certain areas and people only speak one language. It's also not fair on the immigrants themselves. When you have women, for example, from certain backgrounds that are basically relegated to the home, that have no opportunity to learn how to speak English, when they're in communities where they meet people that actually can communicate with them and they can slowly learn to adopt the cultures and values, they don't only are restricted to the home, and they don't only have to stay within that domestic environment. They can pursue opportunities, they can find jobs, they can understand their children better and how they relate and interact with other people in school. They can learn the culture better. There's so many opportunities that open up by integrating people into your society. And integration works both ways. It works from the government actually implementing policy deliberately to make it happen, but it also works from the immigrants that have chosen to come to this country. It's not about demonizing anyone. It's about using common sense and actually identifying a way for us to exist as a country and as one.
Alicia.
I think what was most offensive about Robert Jenrick's comments is that I don't judge whether someone is integrated or not by their skin colour. I judge them based on their behaviours, their actions, the way they embrace values and the way they contribute to our society.
OK, in fairness to him, I have to say, he then went on to say, it's not about the colour of your skin or your faith. Of course it isn't.
And yet we all heard the opening sentence that he used when he made those comments. Look, the reality is, I do hear many people saying, it feels like our country's becoming a hotel and it's not our home. And I am worried about particularly some of the sectarianism that we are seeing. So the Green Party video, my biggest issue with it was the fact that it had images of Keir Starmer meeting with Modi, and they were essentially saying, this man is not on your side, and they were dragging sectarian politics from Pakistan and India into the UK. Yep. Now, my constituency is next to Leicester. We saw riots where people tried to transplant conflicts from other areas of the world to our communities, and it hurt us. Now, unfortunately, what they essentially did was copy and paste what Labour did in the Batley and Spen by-election, where they put a picture of Boris Johnson meeting with Modi, and they used the same trick against us. So essentially, they've just applied the exact same concept, which I also found offensive them. But there is a problem, because we still have a teacher and his family in Batley living in hiding because of what he was trying to teach his class. We still have girls going through FGM. We still have people doing forced marriage. We do have to deal with those issues because they are fundamentally not British. So we have to make sure that we are a welcoming country. We want people to come here and make a success of themselves. We want the wealth generators. People want to contribute to our communities. But however, they cannot bring with them cultural, and they are cultural behaviours that are completely anathema to the culture of Britain.
Tom? Are we failing to have an honest conversation about identity and social cohesion?
Yeah, I think the gentleman's point that raised there about tolerance is something that we should all be, I'm very, very proud of in this country, that we are an incredibly inclusive, culturally rich, diverse, wonderful space where people have been able to grow, exist, and become incredibly, I suppose, connected together. And conversation and points and sentences that Robert Jenrick has made, it kind of it weakens social infrastructure. It's very unhelpful. It drives a narrative that is pushed through different party political gain for votes. It helps drive division. In a world where I generally think that immigration is constantly used by political parties for masking years and years of infrastructure to health, housing, employment, education. It is not the fault of immigration. It is the fault of poor spending. It is the fault of poor money management. And it's constantly used as this kind of battering tool where we are a culturally rich and very diverse country, and it's one that we should all be very, very proud of. And tolerance is something that we most definitely need to bring back.
OK. Man at the back there with the shirt, yes.
In relation to the comments about Handsworth, I'm someone that grew up in Handsworth and definitely benefited from the diversity and the difference of people. And I think that's a huge strength, not only of this great city, but of this great country. And I find it really ironic that Soho Road was actually used as an example to almost defame Birmingham, but no one wants to really talk about the huge economic impact it has in the wedding industry, in the food industry, in the hospitality industry. All of that key information is missed from the media.
OK. Jess?
Thank you. So I think that a lot of the panel and actually a lot of the audience have covered a lot of the things that I would have liked to say, which is that we can absolutely have a multicultural society. I believe we can, because I think that we all benefit from it. But if we're talking back to Jake's question, which was, have we done a good job at cohesion? I think that's a legitimate conversation to have, because what we are not good at doing as a country over successive governments at successive years is actually building communities. We've seen really savage cuts in local authorities. Birmingham is a great example of that, which means that all of those support services that were available are disappearing. They are so underfunded. It goes back to the lady in the pink jacket's point about her services being underfunded. So if you are an immigrant who wants to engage and learn the language, it's very hard to find that ability in areas. And that's where the charitable sector has really stepped up across areas like Birmingham, but also across in my constituency in Chichester. They're doing amazing work to create communities, because it's all very well and good building houses, but unless you build communities, you lose an identity, your British identity, which is so important.
OK. All right. Listen, I'm going to move on, because I want to try and get through 4 questions tonight. And I haven't been managing to do that recently. I'm determined to try and do it tonight. But I just want to tell you where we are next week, which is Kettering. And the week after that, we're off to Wythenshawe. So if you live in, or, yes, look at you smiling there. So if you live in or close to either area, Kettering or Wythenshawe, and you would like to come and be part of the Question Time audience, apply to the website. The instructions are here, and you'll be asked lots of questions, and hopefully we will see you. So it's Kettering next week and then Wythenshawe the week after. OK, Andrew Chapman, where are you sitting? Off you go.
Is it time to seriously reform hospitality business rates when I and other independent pub operators are seeing increases from this April? In my case, a 41% increase in rates payable from April this year.
Little intake of breath around the audience there. Well, look, so you obviously, you're in a pub, Andrew. Just tell us a bit more about it.
I have two rurally located pubs that are the hubs of the village. They're part of the community, so they don't just serve food and drink. We welcome lonely people, we look after people, work closely with the churches in our village to form part of the community, and we seem to be taxed out of existence, whether it's NI cost increases of last year or the business rates increases this year. It's just becoming impossible to make a profit.
And you can keep going there, presumably? Or not? Or is that in doubt?
Well, I'm getting towards the end of my working career, and I've been in hospitality for many, many years. My son was going to take over the family business, but, you know, now, am I giving him an opportunity to move forward, or am I handing him a poison chalice?
Tom, obviously I'm going to come to you. I mean, you own, is it 6 restaurants?
Five restaurants, 4 of which are pubs. 4 of which are pubs.
OK, so just from your perspective, is it as difficult for you as Andrew is saying? And if so, why?
It is equally as difficult. You know, I'm in a very fortunate position that I'm sat here as somebody with a secondary form of income from media and television, whatever else. However, my businesses are under exactly the same pressure as Andrew. And Andrew, the way that he talks about it there is I mean, hospitality is much bigger than just the problems of the business. It's so much more important to the network of society. It knits us all together. It's the fabric. It's connection to people. It runs so much deeper. And as an industry, it employs over 3 million people. Hospitality as a sector is the 3rd biggest in the UK. And on top of that, the network of, I suppose, the veins that it spreads out to into the rest of the country through farming, through fishery, through agriculture, through logistics. There's so many more people that are involved in hospitality. And the prices and the pressures that the businesses sit under. Since 2020, Andrew there talks about business rates. Yours went up over 40%. Mine, on average, across my 4 pubs, have gone up 115%. So
wow. And just explain to, because it's so, just for those of you who aren't aware, so in the 2025 autumn budget, Rachel Reeves announced that business properties would be revalued from April. I mean, that happens every 3 years or so, but that will lead to a number of businesses paying higher business rates. And that coincides with the COVID-era discounts for small retail, hospitality and leisure, which were cut from 75% to get these people through COVID to 40% in November, and then they will be cut entirely from April. So you've got that double whammy. What the government has done is announced that pubs and live music venues in England will get a 15% discount off those new business rates. Is that not good enough for you?
No, that's a 15% discount off a 115% rise, which is still a monstrous, catastrophic rise. And they talk about it's a very different position from where pre-COVID to now. Since 2020, food inflation is up 40%, and in certain items it's up even more. Things, beef is up way more than that. Veg oil, cooking oil, like the staples are up nearly 70%. So across board, that's food inflation. National insurance increases have gone up. Minimum wage has gone up. Energy and utility bills are up 70%.
Well, look, you've got the government here in the form of Lisa. So what do you want to say to her? What do you want her to do?
It's a reduction in VAT. That is the biggest thing that would save hospitality, frontline hospitality. It's a reduction in VAT. It's the only way that as an industry it is going to be able to survive. It sits at the minute at 20%. The rest of Europe, even Ireland that sits there is quite high, is 13.5%. The rest of it, Portugal is 6%, Spain, France 10%, Germany is 7%. These are places and these are countries where hospitality isn't thriving, it's just existing. Because at the minute, what's happening is we are squeezing the life out of hospitality. And once it's gone, it is gone. And if you keep squeezing, you end up crushing it and it will disappear.
Well, look, Lisa, Tom has come prepped with his facts, that's clear, and you're getting a cri de coeur from him, but also from Andrew sitting there, nodding away at what Tom has to say. Is that something that you would consider?
No, and look, in fairness to Tom, I mean, he wasn't reading that off a piece of paper, he's living and breathing it, and we were talking about it in the green room earlier because I recognise what you're both saying, and I don't want to pretend. It drives me absolutely up the wall when you see politicians coming out and saying it's all getting better, it's all fine, when the people who are living it know that it's really tough. And you're telling us it's tough, and I've heard it, I get it.
But they're also saying part of the reason it's tough is because of your government's
choices
policies.
we make. But let me try and deal with that, because I mean, the first thing is that you're right to say that there's a revaluation of business rates every few years, and the particular problem this time round is that the funding for COVID relief came to an end. Now, you know, we could have extended that. We would have had to pay for it because there was no money allocated to pay for it beyond those few years that it existed. And so what we did was we found billions of pounds in the budget to put into trying to help people transition off that relief. And when we were told by many people, including Tom, that that wasn't sufficient, the Chancellor has gone back and looked again and found more that we're putting particularly into pubs and live music venues. Now, I'm not saying for a moment, Tom, that you're not right to say that they've gone up and then we've taken some money off that. That is true, but I'm just explaining to you why that's happened. Now, the other thing that has happened during that time is that we've had to invest in order to get the economy growing. And today we had figures out about the economy, which I appreciate nobody is feeling yet in their pockets, but inflation is coming down and is forecast to go down again. Now, this is important. Why? Because measures that we've taken, like the rise in the minimum wage, is deliberately designed to put money into people's pockets so that they can go out and spend it in the local shops and businesses, the pubs and restaurants, on the high street, the things that we all really value.
But right now, hang on, Lisa.
The signs are that is starting to work.
OK, but right now, you've got Andrew saying, basically I'm going to have to give up, probably. You've got Tom saying we're on our knees, and basically the government's policies are squeezing us out of existence. You know, should you get the economy growing, it's going to take time. What about Tom's request about VAT?
What about VAT now? Like, we had this conversation in the green room. We are listening, and we are not afraid to go away and rethink and try and do things differently. We've already done that with this policy, but we're hearing it again. Yeah, but you see, this is the problem, Esther, because you say U-turn, 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 and you know what I say? I say that people sitting on this panel don't necessarily always know best about what's happening in the country. And if someone tells us there's a problem, I'm proud to be part of a government that will go away and try and fix it.
Certainly no one in Westminster knows better, because I was travelling across the country over the last few days, and the one thing, the consistent thing that I got, other than the fact that Keir Starmer is exceptionally spineless as a leader, was that politicians don't understand our lives, because you have these people insulated from the rest of the country that have spent their entire political careers insulated by this political policy complex. No, let me finish.
What would you do, and how would you pay
hold
for
on. She's saying that inflation has come down because of the government's decisions. Inflation has not come down because of anything that the government has done. Inflation has come down because global energy prices have come down. Rachel Reeves made the choice, instead of doing something that Angela Rayner was in favour of, which was putting a windfall tax on banks last November when she was considering options, she decided to put up the taxes of small businesses instead of putting a windfall tax on banks. That is a decision made by this government. I'm sorry, you are gaslighting the public into believing that this government has any competence or any understanding with what business people are dealing with. And two election cycles ago, you may not believe this, I actually voted for Labour. And I voted for the Labour Party because at the time I believed that they were the only party speaking to the interests of young people. Because I think in politics today, I feel like young people don't get a fair representation, and I was encouraged by hearing a major political party talking about or understanding the struggles that young people are facing. Now Britain has the highest youth unemployment rate in Europe, 16%. The under 18 minimum wage has gone up by 83% in 7 years. How many of you know anyone whose wages have gone up by 83% in 7 years? And what it means for businesses, particularly in hospitality, is it's too expensive to hire young people. So this Labour government is pricing young people out of their first job. They are choosing not to tax people like bankers, for example, not reforming the carry rates, which Rachel Reeves was considering putting it in line with the top rate of income tax. No. The profits of bankers and traders was more important for her, so she chose to put on the average working people instead.
Okay,
and then this person has the audacity to tell the British public that because the inflation rate is going down...
We've just been talking about civility in politics. Could you show some manners, please?
This member of government has the audacity to tell the British public that it is the government that is making people's lives easier. It's completely ridiculous, and it is an insult to the business owners that have no respite from the constant tax rises and gaslighting by this government. I'm sorry, this is ridiculous.
All right, well, hang on 1 second, because you all want to come back in, and I'm going to let you all. But Lisa, you won't want to be brief, but very briefly, would you just like to answer that?
Yeah, well, it was just absolute nonsense from start to finish. Why would any government come into power and say we don't want to help small businesses? I mean, it's just
then why are you raising
absolutely
the
absurd.
taxes?
Well, sorry, I just listened to a very long and quite rude monologue from you. So I think, I do think there are people who want to know the answer to this question. We've been talking about some of the measures that might help. Of course, I'll take them away and we'll discuss them and we'll see what more that we can do. We want to help to protect our businesses, but what I'm trying to explain is that we've already done quite a lot to try and make this easier. We recognise the problem. We're not going to be able to fix it overnight. But for a long time in this country, what you've had governments that make short-term tactical decisions that have meant that our economy is not growing, that people have lived with a cost of living crisis for over 15 years. And we've got to change the fundamentals of the economy or we're going to end up back here in a few years' time.
Lisa, you said the government there have done quite a lot. It's nowhere near enough. There is a whole industry that is on its knees. And 15% reduction in business rates of an increase is just nowhere near enough to help in hospitality sector.
I'm not disputing
and
the
problem. That's just for pubs and music venues. Actually, the difference in costs that come into a pub, that come into a restaurant, what's the difference between the two? There are none. The same. The minimum wage is there. The food cost is there. All of the other issues that drop into hospitality in general are exactly the same. Helping a pub sector slightly. The business rates are calculated slightly differently on a pub. I understand that. However, the industry sector itself is absolutely getting squeezed, and the government must do more.
All right.
Fundamentally, there is the Reform Party that have come out with a policy that is shouting about 10%.
Not here to
I mean, just from a slightly more right-sided rhetoric that comes through, there is a 10% reduction in VAT that's coming through there. Andy Burnham, Angela Rayner, both from Labour Party, are both wanting that.
Now, look, you all want to come in, and so do all of you. Jess, I'm going to come to you in a minute. You keep eyeballing me. I'm going to come to you, I promise. And Lizzie. Man here. Yes, you.
Yes, national insurance is a very blunt instrument, as is rates. I'm wondering why the government didn't use VAT. Could it be targeted in a good way to help hospitality businesses?
OK, and VAT, which of course is what Tom is suggesting as well. Yes, woman there in the glasses.
You say inflation is coming down. It may be coming down, but prices have risen. They're not coming down. They're just not going up as quickly because inflation is low. So we're not seeing a lot of benefit.
OK, and the man just in front of you wanted to say something.
Yeah, thank you. Also, measures like Rachel Reeves saying, it's OK, we'll let pubs open longer when the World Cup's on, is just not helping. And it actually is quite disingenuous.
Do you work in the hospitality trade as well?
No, I don't work in it, but I support them.
Yes, we all support them. Yes, I hear it. I like the way you put that. Yes, man there with the blue top with the white collar, yes.
I just wanted to say we just had a conversation about social cohesion, but we're pricing out the businesses where those places are to integrate, and we're also pricing young people out of jobs. So where are they to integrate? And I was just wondering what the government's position on that was.
OK. Well, let me get round the rest of the panel. Jess.
So, following on from what the gentleman in the audience just said, we were just talking, the first question was about community, and hospitality businesses are quite often the heart of that community. Esther made the comment that politicians live in a Westminster bubble. We often refer to the Westminster bubble. We don't actually live there. There aren't bunk beds. We do go home to our constituencies and live our lives in a very normal way. And before I went into politics...
listen to your electorates as
and
well.
before I went into politics, I owned a restaurant, like the gentleman over there, with his pub, and like Tom. And it's a game that my husband and I left because we couldn't keep up. And so I know that it's even worse than when I, sold that business in 2018, because now you've got the additional pressure of the national insurance increases. That has disproportionately affected hospitality because you employ more part-time staff. They moved the threshold down, so it pulled more people into paying those NICS rises. It means it disincentivises them to take risks on young people. That's where most young people cut their teeth in hospitality. I certainly did as a 13-year-old washing dishes in a tea room.
At 13?
At 13. I mean, back in the day, we're going
Child
back a
labour
while.
laws. Hang on a minute, Jess.
And I was paid £3 an hour, and I was glad to do it because I was liking earning a wage, and then I'd spend it on tea cakes after my shift. We do need to do more to protect those hospitality businesses. The Liberal Democrats laid out a policy just before the autumn budget, just before Rachel Reeves came to the House and put more pressure on those businesses. And we said, if you tax the banks, if you do a windfall tax on the banks, that was going to raise $7 billion in revenue, and that could have been directly spent bringing down VAT for hospitality. Because, like you say, things like NICS rises, business rates, every single business is slightly differently affected in hospitality by those things, but VAT affects them all. If you bring that down, then those businesses have a little bit more headroom so that they can carry on surviving.
Esther made also a very good point about youth unemployment coming through. Hospitality is one of the biggest employers of youth hospitality, and it's one of the...
And are you finding the fact that the minimum wage has gone up for young people, is that proving a disincentive or not?
Yes, it does, yeah, it absolutely does. But what happens is, the less people that go out, the more you put pressures onto your full-time working staff. So instead of part-time staff coming through, what happens there is your full-time staff members you start looking at the infrastructure, the way that the business works, you start trimming it down, you take your business to the gym and you look at how it absolutely works. And youth unemployment is massive, but one of those things that they're transferable skills. I'm sure there's many people here, that have worked in hospitality, whether it's washing up, working behind a bar, being at student unions, all of those sort of spaces that people... And it's so important for young adults to have left school, are still at school, go to university, come into hospitality, because at the minute they spend their time with their peer groups, or the only adults they speak to are their parents or their parents' friends or their lecturers. It's their first opportunity to integrate into society and become grown-ups.
Alicia.
So I think the other politicians on the panel know how rare it is that you get a Prime Minister's question, and I had one a few months back, and I raised pubs, and that's because one pub a day has closed under this government. And when we talk about business rate increase...
Four hospitality busissists close every single day.
OK, Alicia's talking about that specifically. But anyway,
but the wider hospitality is important. One of the pubs I raised, the the Bertie Arms in Uffington, they're looking at a 2,000% business rate increase by 2029. 2,000. And the Olive Branch, when we look at young people, they've scrapped all of their young people because they've said, well, we can't afford to have 4 people who all work 2 days a week when actually we could just have 1 person who's full-time. And that means when those students go to university and they normally would come back and do their summer jobs, there's no summer job waiting for them. So it is really difficult. And I was really shocked because many of you may have seen this week that Rachel Reeves' entrepreneur advisor, her exact words were, we don't need more restaurants. Those are the words she said. And that's, I think, why we're seeing so many issues, because of the 200,000 jobs that have been lost in this country since the budget, over half are in tourism and hospitality. And that is really concerning because those are young people overwhelmingly. And yes, inflation has come down slightly, but it's still 2.7% higher than it was when the Conservatives left power. So the question is, why, because I'm assuming Lisa is making the case constantly for tourism and hospitality, why is the Chancellor not listening? And we've said we would cut business rates. We've said, look, 100% relief below £100,000, but I'm definitely willing to take away VAT and have a look at that as well. But I am really worried because I represent a really, really rural community, and I mean hundreds of villages, and our pubs are the lifelines for people. particularly people who are widowed, who live at home alone, but also our young people who need to get out of home and not just be on social media. So this is an issue really close to my
Can I
heart.
just say that is but look, I mean, I've heard some suggestions on the panel, and I appreciate that, because you know, often what happens is you sit on the panel, everyone acknowledges that there's a problem, but then it falls to the government spokesperson to solve it alone. And you know, I would just gently make the point that the windfall tax that Jess is talking about raises nowhere near the amount of money that this country needs. The national insurance contribution rise for employers raised a huge amount of money, including £29 billion that went into the National Health Service, which I think most people in this country would support. No, but let me just say this as well. Let me just say this as well, that one of the things about, and I recognise what you're saying about young people, it's why we introduced the youth guarantee, which we also paid for by measures in the budget that all of the political parties on this panel opposed. But we, one of the things about the National Insurance contribution rise is that it doesn't apply to under 21s, and that was part of our thinking, is that many young people, including me, our waitress when I was younger, get their first job in hospitality and in those industries. And by taking the decision that we took, we were able to protect the under 21s and make it easier for employers to employ them. So I'm not saying for a moment, I'm not saying that there aren't challenges. We recognise the challenges. We're listening. I won't be put off by people saying that we're U-turning, because if we hear this, we will listen and we'll work with you to try and fix it. But what I am explaining is that there was a logic to these decisions that we took that we think will serve the interests of the country best.
Let me move on. Apologies to those who've got your hands up, otherwise I'm not going to get through these questions. And lots of you had something to say about this next thing. Karen Knox, are they?
Hi. If Birmingham is no longer in the red, why are we being charged extra council tax when we have shocking roads, a bin strike that never ends, and no one is being held accountable?
So you sound thoroughly fed up, Karen.
Absolutely.
Right, so look, for those of you who don't know, you will all know, but for those of you who are watching at home who may not be quite so up to speed with this, so in 2023, Birmingham City Council issued a Section 114 notice. So that is essentially declaring bankruptcy. In the last month, I think it is beginning to emerge out of that. But in the meantime, it's been under sort of special measures, and government-appointed people have been kind of overseeing what's been going on. There has also been a bin strike for over a year. And at the moment, there's no sign of it ending. Lisa, I'm going to come back to you, because, I mean, this is the UK's second largest city. It's the biggest council in Europe. Financial crisis, the bin strike that drags on and on. This is a Labour council. You can't be proud of this.
No, look, I mean, first of all, on the bin strike, it is appalling, and it's been going on for far too long. And I want to be absolutely crystal clear. There are offers on the table from Birmingham City Council, and I say this with real feeling as somebody who has been a member of a trade union for as long as I've been in work, and who believes fundamentally that people have the right to be paid and treated properly. But there are offers on the table, and we need the unions, and Unite in particular, to sit down, get round the table and agree to a proposal. Those offers have been made, and it is absolutely essential that that happens as soon as possible. I really share your anger about that. It needs to be resolved. This is a great city, and it's being held back by this issue. And in terms of the wider financial crisis, look, this is a big problem for councils the length and breadth of the country, because, you know, think about my council. We lost a third of our budget in the first year of the Conservative Lib Dem coalition government, and it wasn't an accident, actually. If you remember the rhetoric around that time, it was about rolling back the bloated states, they used to call it. And the idea was that if you cut back the public sector, then the private sector would suddenly magically flourish to fill the gap. But what did it mean? It just meant that our public services ended up on their knees, and we lost good expertise as well. Now, we're rebuilding that, so we've just increased the amount of funding available to Birmingham in particular, councils in general. We've also introduced longer-term funding settlements, because most people in this room probably don't know, but it's absolute. You will know, Jess, as a councillor, previously, it's an absolute nonsense that you have councils who get a one-year funding settlement, so they're writing their budgets before they even know how much money they've got in them. So we think that will produce better value for money and better decision-making. And we're doing much, much more about investing in Birmingham more generally. I hope that will mean your council tax bills will go down, but most of all, this bin strike really is holding back one of the best cities in the world, and it needs to be resolved.
Alicia.
I mean, I think it's extraordinary. I think you've been incredibly let down. And I find it really odd because I sit in Parliament, and if this was my community, I'd be putting in urgent questions, which is the only way that backbench MPs can essentially force the government ministers to come and answer your questions. I'd be putting one in every single week. And I'm afraid, I think you're being let down by your local members of Parliament, because I think we've only had 2. And when 2 urgent questions in all this time that you've been dealing with these bin issues, and when the ministers come, there are no meaningful answers. And I do think, I'm sorry, it's about the relationship between Labour and their trade unions. And it really disappoints me. And I wish, and this is a very part of political point, I wish you still had Andy Street, because I do not think he'd have just sat by and let it happen.
How do you then explain that when your party was in government, you had these issues over in Coventry?
We did not have bin...
And I raised that. I raised that over and over again.
We did not.
The bin
Does anyone remember bins being out on the streets in Coventry for 18
Well, I
months?
don't live in Coventry, but the people of Coventry do. And I raised that issue over and over again with Michael Gove, and his answer was it's nothing to do with government. So I'm sorry, but I'd really agree with what you said at the start of that, but please don't try and pretend that somehow it was different under a Conservative
I'm afraid
government.
it is different.
It absolutely wasn't.
Because we all know about the bin strikes. I don't represent Birmingham. I've known about the bin strikes. I've been monitoring them. I don't remember Coventry, in which case I apologise the fact that I didn't know about those. But we know about bin strikes here. And it has been absolutely extraordinary seeing Labour MPs too scared to raise with their own government what is going on with the Labour Council under their government. And that's why it's quite easy. Look at Hansard, which is the record of how often MPs have raised it. You'll see they haven't raised it, and Birmingham MPs haven't even then turned up when the questions have been asked.
Right. Well, there's lots of hands up, not surprisingly, on this point. So let's see, where are we going to go? It's the man there in the second row in the blue sweater. Yeah.
Hi, Lisa. Sorry, you talked about the extra funding that might be coming into Birmingham. When do you think that will be? Because right now we're facing increased council taxes. Obviously, we talked about the bins, but our roads are just literally holes everywhere.
Yeah.
To the point where it's actually really dangerous.
Like driving on the moon.
Yeah. So we've
really
it's like you're driving like this,
no,
like
100,
a computer game.
Yeah.
100%, and that is the case up and down the country. We've had over a decade of
So when's the extra
underinvestment.
funding coming
I'm not making excuses because we're in government and
When's
it's our
the extra
job
funding
to fix it,
coming
and
in?
we will. So we've just allocated the funding to Birmingham City Council, so that has been allocated now, so that has happened, and we've also invested in filling in potholes across Birmingham and across the country as well. It's the biggest investment that has been for a very long time.
Where? Man in the grey shirt at the very back there.
Just on council tax, there should be a freeze. When all these strikes and things like this is going on, there should be a freeze because it's affecting so many people and the cost of living is going up and everything else. So I think we should do a freeze until this is all sorted.
Yes, the council tax, as again you will all know, has gone up by around 18% over 2 years, which is no small sum. Yes, person there, and you've got a grey top and a white shirt underneath it, I think. Yes, you.
Oh, yeah. You just said that you've invested money in the roads in Birmingham. On my 15-minute journey to work this morning, I counted 30 potholes. 30.
Yeah.
I don't see any work going on.
No, well, that's why we put the money up. So that money has just gone in, and so you should see improvements. But this is an issue, the length and breadth of the country after over a decade of underinvestment. And we made a commitment at the election we would turn that around, and that is what we're doing.
Karen, you stuck your hand up again.
I did, yeah. I'm pretty much going to repeat what was just said. I mean, when you're driving to work, it's like dodgem cars. You're not only looking out for the traffic as you should be, but you're trying to dodge the holes because your car's going to get damaged. And I know I'm going to be going to court if that happens to me. Yeah, it's just not on.
Jess.
Thank you. So when we talk about Birmingham, it's an economic powerhouse. It's got a huge industrial heritage. It's got so much untapped potential. So I have a proposal for you, Lisa, which the Liberal Democrats laid out about a month ago, which is we think a big problem about why we're not getting growth in this country is that basically the Treasury has this computer says no approach to everything that could actually get growth going. So we'd cut it in half. We'd have the Treasury in London being the Office of Expenditure, and then we'd have the Department of Growth based right here in Birmingham, because the economic output of Birmingham compared to London is 40% behind London because you've had such little investment in Birmingham. If we could close that gap by just 10%, it would raise an additional £12 billion in
So how does splitting a department into two create more money?
Because at the moment, the Treasury basically block everything. They are holding all of the money in one place. If you look at places like Ireland, they have 2 different departments. Australia also do the same thing. They have 2 different departments. One that's in charge of tax receipts and expenditure, and another department which is totally focused on getting the engine of growth going.
Business and Trade.
And so there is, and I'm sure if the Department of Business and Trade is doing that, then it goes to the Treasury, and the Treasury says no.
Well, that's
so
why we
you
wrote an
split that in
industrial
half,
strategy.
and it's a real opportunity to get growth going. But importantly, put investment here in Birmingham, so that Birmingham can grow.
Places like Digbeth Law.
I'm surprised no one has mentioned austerity. So between 2010 and 2020, councils received 26% less in funding from the central government because of austerity. In the worst hit councils, like Birmingham, it was up to 35%. And many Birmingham City councillors have said that the city lost about £1 billion in funding over that period, which obviously set them back. But the reality of this entire debacle is 2 things. The council is too big. This is the largest council in Europe, even though Birmingham is the 26th largest city in Europe. It's too big, and what happens is there's not enough accountability, because in 2012, when you had a Labour supermajority as a result or in reaction to all of these to austerity measures, there was basically no accountability. All of these decisions were being made. The Oracle IT system, for example, that was estimated to cost £19 million, is now somewhere estimated to cost around £170 million, and that's if it works. And then you had the equal pay lawsuits that the Birmingham City Council was warned about for years. Before this latest tranche of equal pay claimants came in, the city had already spent £1 billion on equal pay claimants because of how they structured the jobs and pay grades for Birmingham City Council employees. So the council had a lot of warning, and they still chose not to do anything about it. And so you had a second tranche of all these equal pay claims that basically hit at the same time as this Oracle fiasco, and you now have a council that was at the time £1 billion in debt. How we can allow any council to get into £1 billion of debt is actually a marvel. Bear in mind, no one has been fired. You can never run a company that way. If you ran a lemonade stand the way we run our government, it would close within a week for hygiene issues, but somehow people get away with it. So, you know, the fact that the council was set back in funding is one thing, but we have to have measures in place that actually forces people to be accountable. You cannot run up a debt of £1 billion and expect your residents to have their council tax increase for reduced services. That is an insult, and that is not acceptable. And when it comes to the bin strikes, they could end tomorrow. You know the reason why they're not ending it? Because the Labour Council does not want to hire private contractors to collect the bins, because the bin workers in Birmingham City is a unionised workforce, and as they should be. Why should they receive?
Hiring agency workers, are they not?
Why should they receive less pay? Because Birmingham City Council refused to get on top of the equal pay claimants and actually change the structure of how they employ people.
Okay, as I understand it, Birmingham City Council has hired agency
They've got
workers.
agency contractors.
They don't want to hire them on a permanent basis, which is why this is all going on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the frustrations that the residents of Birmingham have been echoed by many people watching this up and down the country and finding similar frustrations with their own city councils. I absolutely find that outstanding that the UK's second biggest city has run up a debt that's so huge and so hard. I don't know enough about running city councils, but I imagine it's very similar to trying to run a business. You have income streams and you try to spend it properly in the correct and right manner. I imagine this is down to a continued issue of long-term underfunding. Businesses, I'm sure over the years you've probably seen many high street businesses close, retail spaces disappear, hospitality venues shut. That's revenue stream for councils. That is taxation purposes. That's business rates that should be coming in to the council for them to be able to spend, even if they are pumped up by 42% or 115%. Right. But business closure, so when it comes to, it will come to, I imagine, if this isn't something that's happened overnight, this is something that's been long-term mismanagement and underfunding. Okay.
All right, I've not got a lot of time. I think it's about 7 minutes. But I'm going to try and squeeze in this last question. From Peter Moore. Where are you? Ah, there you go.
Given the latest accusations surrounding Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is the monarchy fit for purpose in the 21st century?
So, look, we're not going to be able to give this question as much time as it deserves, but we're going to give it a bit of a go. Interestingly, of course, because the Lib Dems this week have been calling for greater transparency. I mean, just not all of you may be aware of this, but MPs are not generally able to freely scrutinise the royals in Parliament. Very little is known about how much money the royals actually have. I mean, estimates vary from 650 million to over £1 billion. No one really knows. And they are also exempt from all kinds of laws and taxes as well. Jess?
So before being elected, I had no idea that politicians were unable to scrutinise members of the royal family in Parliament, in the House of Commons or the House of Lords. In fact, the Speaker mentioned that when we have references to the royals, they have to be rare and respectful. We are not allowed to scrutinise the royal family. The only reason that we were able to have the debate this week where we called for the evidence to be provided as to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's position as a special envoy was because he no longer holds the title of prince. That's why we were allowed to have that debate. But I think that this is a key opportunity for us to actually grasp the nettle in Parliament.
I was going to say, do you want to take it further as Lib Dems?
Really
so be able to know, for
should.
example, how much money they have.
I really think that we should, because I think if we think back to why we've been scrutinising Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and the Jeffrey Epstein and the victims of Epstein, I think it is important for all victims across this country to know that nobody is above the law, regardless of birthright, position, friends, bank balance. Nobody should be above scrutiny and nobody should be above the law.
Esther?
I appreciate the anger around Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He is clearly an entitled, arrogant man with no judgment who basically used his royal titles to try and enrich himself and his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, who...
Because I have to say at this point that he denies any wrongdoing.
Of course.
I have to listen, you may all laugh there, but, you know, this is my duty and I have to say that.
Alongside he and his ex-wife, basically used their royal connections and titles to try and get as much money as possible. And I would like to reference Prince Philip, who called her odd and pointless, and I think that basically fairly encapsulates the two of them. I think the question is, how can we prevent this from ever happening? Because other than the fact that he obviously lied about his association with Jeffrey Epstein, and we've seen emails going back to that and attesting to that, you had, like the current Trade Secretary saying back in 2011, criticising the former Prince Andrew's behaviour as a trade envoy, saying on one of his engagements he showed complete disinterest in the people that he was engaging with, and he was just rude, and you've had members of the household that, you know, were his security staff saying he was a very rude man. They nicknamed him something that rhymes with punt. So you can imagine they didn't think very highly of him. And you just have to think, this is not fair on the working royals that actually are looking to just do a good job for the country. And I think the question is, how do we stop this from happening? There has to be some sort of collaboration and some sort of feedback loop between actually the job that these royals are doing, how they engage with the public, the emails and the kinds of people they associate with, and actually members of government saying, OK, you need to stop this. And
yes, I'm going to have to jump in. I'm so sorry, because we're really short of time. And the question is not just about Andrew, it's about, is the monarchy fit for purpose in the 21st century? Should things change? Do you think they should, Alicia? And you have to be brief, forgive me.
So I don't have much time for people who are trying to use this as a chance to say that we need to remove the Republican system, not least because presidents around the world also have scandals. They should face justice in the same way he must face justice. I think the monarchy is incredibly important in this country. I think we're incredibly proud of our monarchy in this country. It's important for our economy. Actually, for me, the bigger issue that we should remember in all this discussion is about the fact that women said they were being treated badly. Women said they were being abused. We were not seen. They were not heard. And actually, it's not just Mountbatten. And I think there's a real risk we focus on him and other men are allowed to slip away into the dark. There's Mandelson, but there's also people like Richard Branson who proactively gave advice to Epstein on how to launder his reputation when he came out of prison. There are too many British men who are being allowed to get off the hook because we're so focused on one individual. The police are now doing their job on the Prince. I want to see, and former Prince, I want to see them do that. But I'm not done until we get through the list of all those men.
OK. Briefly, Tom, the question is the monarchy fit for purpose in the 21st century from what we've learned so far?
Yeah, I mean, I'm I'm not an out-and-out royalist. However, I have a huge amount of respect and understanding for the historic purpose of the royal family and what they have brought and what they do bring to us as a country for trade and tourism in the way that they were. And I think what the king
Should there be greater transparency?
Of course there should be greater transparency, but I think the way that they hold themselves and I think the way that the king has conducted himself and the immediate royal family and the way that they've managed to distance themselves and remove Andrew as a completely separate space in the way the investigation is going to go, and however that ends up, I think they have done a very good job of putting themselves in some form of protective bubble that the royal family should and continue to exist, even though perhaps more transparency moving forward should be the way forward.
Okay. Yeah, very briefly.
Yeah, well, I've changed my mind about the royal family, actually, because I have seen over the years the way in which members of the royal family have been able to bring more compassion and decency into our country, into our political and public discourse, and especially the work that the king does through the King's Trust. I think they manage to reach parts that other parts of government and other people can't, and I think it's incredibly important at its best. I think the monarchy provides a unifier for the nation, but I strongly agree with Alicia that nobody can be above the law. How do you make that real and make sure that those women get justice? I actually think Jess is onto something here, because if you don't have a proper system of scrutiny, then people will get away with it.
OK, listen, I have to say, you know, I have a legal responsibility here. Richard Branson being named in the files does not equate necessarily to wrongdoing. And Sarah Ferguson, obviously, she's not here to defend herself either. So I just have to say that. That's it, we're out of time. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you to all of you for putting your questions. Sorry we had to squeeze that last one so much, but not surprising, you had quite a lot to say about Birmingham City Council. Thought you might. Next week, we're off to Kettering, remember? So if you want to become a big part of the audience, go to the Question Time website and apply. But for now, thank you to the panel, thank you to all of you, and of course, thank you to you at home for watching. Bye-bye.